first of all, you need to go along and keep pressing. See how beautifully pressed this is flat? See how this seam was never pressed? Okay? I can tell, right? Because this seam, I know I'm a witch. I hope my nose is not covering the video, right? My big old word with 3 hairs on it. Okay? So yes, this should be flat like this. Okay? If you, I mean, in this case it's okay, but you can do it later. But when you're starting doing the sleeve, you need to be pressing as you go along. You're gonna regret it if you don't do it. Okay? So we're gonna do the sleeves, and we need to make sure that we have the sleeves in the right place. And that's why I always place the garment as if it is made. Okay? So we need to place the right, not as the right and left, but the correct sleeve on the correct place. You want to put the sleeve backwards. What would be one of the things that you can find to make sure that you're not flipping them is notches. But somehow, somebody forgot notches. There is only one in the back where it should be 2. There is none in the front. But I do have the shoulder, which is the most important one. Okay? So here, this was not pressed either. Okay? I know for a fact that the placket is the back of the sleeve because it goes along the line of the elbow. And my elbows are in the back of my body, not on the front. Okay? And also, I do have 2 notches here. Unfortunately, I don't have 2 notches here to match. So I'm gonna pretend that if the shirt is made, right? And here the most important notch, which is at the top of the shoulder, it's invisible. So this sleeve goes on this side. Are we correct? Now, I'm going to do right sides together. And I'm going to pin the sleeve. So I'm going to show you how to pin it. Because some of you are going to start pinning it and you're going to have a lot of fabric on one side and not on the other. Somebody happened. And then when you pin it correctly, you're able to make it fit. Because guess what? You are measured, right? So you know that it fits exact. So you have to make it fit. Okay? It's a simple geometry. I'm going to say it and you guys are going to probably just like whoop your head, right? But if you have a circle and you have a bigger circle, meaning this is your seam and this is your seam allowance, right? Then this becomes bigger. So if you don't pin on your seam, then you're going to have extra material. Now let's do the opposite. Your armhole is this big, and then your seam allowance would be here. So actually, this edge is smaller, but your seam should be exactly the same. So it is an art on actually pinning it correctly and making it fit. And that is why we walk it on the pattern, because for a fact I know this is going to fit perfectly. Okay? So, since I know, and I'm so certain that, you have pins? Since I am so certain that this measures exactly the same, I can be very comfortable pinning the beginning and the end, because everything else is going to fit. Your biggest advice, you always pin at, and you just pinch with your pins perpendicular to your seam and pinching at the 1/2 inch, which is exactly where your seam is going to be. Because if you do it any farther out, then you become, again, the circle being bigger or the circle being smaller, and then it's not going to fit. Okay? We have done that with the princess seam dress. We're going to do that quite a bit when we do the bustier. Okay? And we're going to walk it, and we're going to make sure that it is the right size. But when you get to the machine, it says like, oh, there is like 3 miles leaving. It's like, it shouldn't be. It is just, it wasn't pinned correctly. So now I'm going to go to the end, to the other end. And if I had a notch at the top of the sleeve for the shoulder, I would do that one next. Okay? But I'm not that lucky today. And that would make your life a lot easier. Rather than having to eat the whole steak at once, you eat half of it and then the other half you take a doggy bag. Right? So you don't have to be choking and feel sick. I'm going to pretend that it's in the center. I don't know if it is. But I'm going to pretend that it's here just to make my life easy. I might move it. But one thing very important, you guys are going to see it on level 3 when we do the jacket. Okay? If your notch is not in the right place, when you place your sleeve, it can be like this or like that. Just because this notch is not placed in the right place. Okay? So this is the most important thing. You do a blazer on level 3. Yes. You can do another one at home for whatever you want. I'm all inclusive. Okay? But in class, we're gonna learn. And again, I don't want anybody to be working on anything saying like, oh, I like it for me. So like, I don't care. You guys are really here to learn technique. Okay? If it doesn't fit you and if it's not for you, that's fine. You should be practicing. Then you can make another one on your own size. Yes? And basically the techniques on tailoring are the same. And yeah, even though tailoring actually came from menswear. So see, this kind of is the right size, except that they're not lining up. So I'm gonna line up the seam allowance, okay? Please guys, don't put 1100 million pins because it puckers your fabric, right? But don't put too little, so then the edges do not line up. See, here is a ghost notch that it could have matched, right? Not even a baby one. And then I have it a little bit bigger than this, but remember, this sleeve head is cut in a diagonal. What happens in a diagonal?
Stretch.
Bias stretches out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start easing it in. So I'm going to make this fit whether he wants it or not. Okay? So my trick is I put my finger between the 2 layers and I kind of smooth the fabric in. Again, I don't care if it ruffles or anything outside from that. The only thing I care is that from pin to pin is flat and I don't have gathers. Okay? You might have done your basic torso last semester and you run a stitch to ease in the top of the head, right? A shirt doesn't have that. A blazer do, but a shirt doesn't. It's very flat. So we just need to make it fit. Okay? So always keep in mind O.J. Simpson. If it doesn't fit, you must quit. You must make it fit. Okay? I know. Make everybody else rest in peace too. I'm getting too political. Okay. See? It fit. See that little ruffle? It doesn't matter because when I'm going to stitch it on that line, I don't have it. Okay? So make sure that when you sew it, you don't get the pinch. Just stretch out and sew it. Worry about only that seam allowance. Whatever happens outside on the 2 sides of it, doesn't matter. Okay? So now I'm going to do the other side. And as you guys notice, I always start under the arm because that's not where I'm going to have that ease, right? So we kind of have the same curve of the armhole to the um, bottom of the sleeve head. Let me line it up here. And I'm not gonna sew this. I warned her that I'm gonna take the pins off because I want her to practice. Look, he had an intention of one notch and then a tiny bit of the second one. And guess what? Look, the notches match perfectly. Woohoo! Exactly. And then from there on,
That noise.
get a bomb. We're safe here. We're fashion people. We don't relate to anybody else. Probably, probably I'll get banned or do something for saying that. But it's true. Nobody understands us. We live in a different world. They all think that we all look at ourselves in the mirror and we look pretty all day long. And we do. But at the same time, we understand the business aspect of it, right?
Yes.
Because we understand that first impressions comes only once and we had to do a good impression. So that's why we had to look cute. Right? It's business. So here I have a little extra, so I'm gonna take this pin off and move it around until I make it fit. Okay, I'm not gonna sew this, but I'm gonna tell you what you're going to do. You reverse, you stitch it at the 1/2 inch all the way through, okay? And we're gonna do the flat felt stitch. Okay, you guys recall that.
Yes.
What we're gonna do is, you know how you have the 2 seam allowances? You're gonna trim the seam allowance of the shirt in half. Not of the sleeve, but of the shirt. That way when you press it, the short one you're gonna press it towards the shirt. When you press it, the short one is going to be underneath and the long one on top. So then the one on top, you fold it in half and you top stitch it through. But you do need to press it because otherwise it's going to create a pleat. Okay? We're recording, so I'm going to review it again. You're going to trim off the seam allowance on the shirt, not on the sleeve, in half. So if it was 1/2 inch, it would be 1/4 inch. And then you're gonna press all your seam allowances towards the shirt. So you're gonna have the shorter one underneath the longest one. Then you fold the longest one in half and you top stitch on the edge. And that's your flat felt stitch. Okay? Now, after you sew this, your next step will be to sew from the sleeve. You're gonna match the underarm and all the way to the bottom of the shirt. Okay? And you're also going to do a flat felt stitch. So you're gonna trim off the 1/4 inch, like I just explained on the sleeve, on the back of the shirt. The back of the sleeve and the back of the shirt. And you're gonna press your seam allowances towards the back. So you're gonna have the widest one on top and the shortest one underneath. You're gonna fold it in and you're gonna top stitch from the cuff all the way down to the bottom of the hem, right? So the only thing left we have after that is the collar, which in the next video, commercial, okay? The collar, the cuffs, the hem. We're gonna do a rolled hem. Same thing that you did on the dress. You're gonna fold it in 1/4 inch, another 1/4 inch, and you're gonna top stitch on the edge. Okay? And then buttons and buttonholes, but we'll have a new episode on this telenovela for the buttons and buttonholes. Okay? Any questions? No. Is this pretty clear and pretty simple?
Are we doing a front stitch the whole back and back?
No. You're going to do the armhole and you're going to do it all the underarm.
But the back of the. Okay.
The back, you already did the yoke. Correct? Now we have a whole shirt connected front, yoke, back. You're attaching the sleeve. Now you're going to close the shirt under your arm. Okay?
So,
I know
she's
that
asking
some of
if it
you,
goes all the way down.
yes, you do from cuff, all the underarm
stitch?
to the bottom of the, yes.
Okay.
Okay?
We're confirming.
So I know that some of you that did not take level 1 with me, you did the torso and attach the sleeve in a different way. You close the side and then you attach the sleeve that was already closed. That is more of a tailoring technique. When you do the blazer, you do that. And there are reasons for it. First of all, this is so much easier, okay, and so much faster. And what is the most expensive thing in fashion? And a shirt should not be that expensive, okay? And we don't have gathers or ease on the top of the sleeve. We just need to make it fit, okay? This is completely flushed. I should have worn a shirt today so I can show you. But we have this sample over there, right? Neither one of those two methods is right or wrong, but a blazer, if you ever looked at a jacket, which probably you guys haven't, usually you have a front, you have a middle section. So you don't have a seam right under your arm, and then you have a back. So you can't sew it all completely because the sleeve is never gonna match any of those seams, right? That is one thing. The other thing is most likely you will have a shoulder pad, most likely you will have a sleeve head, you will have a little bit of a rounding top of the sleeve. I don't know, somebody showed my jacket that I was wearing yesterday. I'll make sure to wear one so you guys can see it, right? So you have a nice roll top of the sleeve. This is actually the easiest. All your t-shirts are done like this, okay? Because it makes it a lot easier. Okay, any questions before we take a second break and then, not a second, but 1 second break so we can do the color demonstration?